Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you as always. And today, things are a little bit different because I'm away from home and actually in my friend Sally's office again. But I'm here today with my friend James Berry, Chef James Berry from Pluck Seasoning. Show us the goods, Jamie.
Yeah, right. Ta-da.
There we go. Yeah, all three of them. Let's see. So we've got the zesty garlic, the original, and the pure Oregon blend. Spicy
Uh,
mix. Yes.
yeah, I don't have the black one, the pure, in front of
Okay.
me, but yeah.
But we've got all of those, our favorite seasoning. Those and Dr. Cowan's Garden products are my favorites. I use them every day. So we're really happy to have you here. This is the second time we've been blessed to have you on and to talk with you. So I'm happy to have another conversation. Haven't seen you in a while. What have you been up to?
It's been a while, right? Yeah, I moved
Yeah,
from the West Coast to the East Coast. That was really big.
yeah,
It's been a
that's
year
huge.
now,
Yeah,
and just lots of changes, business wise, just shifting offerings, which we can talk about later, but
yeah,
just really trying to continually optimize and make sure that we're offering what people want,
yeah,
and then of course making sure that I'm healthy and that my family is well, of course, too. Like just really,
yeah.
I feel like I'm always a work in progress, and it's the focus is always. And I know you post about this all the time too, and you're similar. It's like it's always about just kind of assessing, like, am I living my mission, and am I prioritizing what matters?
And those are questions we have to ask ourselves every day. And I find myself getting so caught up in the busyness of each day, week, month, and year that I have to remind myself, wait a minute, slow down. This was my month to slow down, and instead a lot of unexpected things happen. And it didn't work out that way for me. But for you, how are you finding life on the East Coast?
I'm looking around it because I'm in a room with lots of windows. It's been really great. I'm a West Coast kid, so it's very challenging for me still to get used to the humidity.
Oh, that's
Um,
different. Yeah.
it's interesting what it's kind of bringing up in me. That's been eye-opening, because sometimes, like just to give a little example, like if I get a stuffed nose, which I had about a year ago when we first moved here, and we're kind of transitioning weather-wise.
Yeah.
um, I had this big anxiety attack. And I think it was because when we first moved here, I was also in a house that had mold. It was very clearly that it had mold because you
Oh,
could smell it in the basement. And my anxiety level went so high because I was struggling to breathe, not only because of what was going on inside my body, but outside because of the humidity. And then I would go outside the house and I still was struggling. So I was having this really huge anxiety, kind of panic attack for like 2 days.
oh,
Just, and I think it was a mix of mold, a cold, having a cold, and then also acclimating to the different weather. It was
yeah, a
really,
whole new climate. It is
yeah.
drastically different here than on the West Coast. And the further inland you go, the more humidity you have as well. So, but now you're adjusted, you're not in a moldy home anymore.
Not anymore, at least we don't think. And and then of course I've really learned what matters for me, and my kids are doing well, they're happy, and my wife is very happy. Like she's happier than she ever has been.
Oh,
And just
wonderful.
just seeing, my family flourishing with the move, which took some time for my oldest child, my eldest daughter, took her many months to kind of finally be here. But once she
Yeah.
did, she's found some beautiful friends, and honestly, I'm finding, like, even if I'm not, like, I'm here and I'm enjoying it, I do miss aspects of the West Coast, but seeing my family so happy really fills me. And I think that's kind of what I've learned, is that, home is wherever you are, but what really makes it a home for me is my family. And so seeing them flourish is all I really need.
Wow, you are a good man. My husband is very much the same way. Yeah. Our family is our first priority. And if it's not, then we ought to get our priorities in check, because a happy family life brings much fulfillment.
It really
So,
does. It really
yeah.
does.
Well, I'm glad all of that is working out. And we'll come back and talk a little bit later about what you're doing and what's new. But I want to go ahead and get started on. We're going to delve into your background a little bit and get your viewpoint on different food ideologies coming from your experience. And with that, we're going to start with you for a time were a popular vegan vegetarian chef. That was some years ago.
Yeah. So when I decided to go to culinary school, which was in my 30s, I knew I didn't want to work in a restaurant. I was very clear about not wanting to work in that environment and in those hours.
Yeah, yeah, they're
But
tough.
yeah, they really are. But I also knew I needed it to have an advantage. Like just knowing how to cook wasn't going to be enough because there's lots of cooks out there. There's lots of people that
Right.
know how to cook. So, but there aren't necessarily a lot of people that know how to make, for example, really good, like tasty vegan vegetarian food. If you remember, back in the day, because this is 20 years ago now, right? So
Hmm.
back in the day, health food was seen as grilled chicken breast, steamed vegetables, and a baked potato,
Yes.
right? So
Oh,
very bland, very kind of like standard American diet, but just very simply prepared. And I just knew like that's not what I want to do. And this school, the Natural Gourmet Institute, it doesn't exist anymore. So that's why I'm not
oh,
pushing people to check it out. It's now part of another school's program, and I can't speak to it anymore. But this
okay.
program was very well known for uh, helping people with private chefs. So it was a really great way to get into the private chef world, which is what I wanted. And then also they really excelled at just bringing lots of flavor to food, particularly food that was vegan, vegetarian. I also did, of course, learn meats, and I learned seafood and fish as well. But the bulk of it was like making your own seitan, learning how to do tempeh, but learning how to do this stuff really well. And uh, and I and it worked. Like that was a big advantage when I first got out, like having those skills. Now, was I actually a vegan vegetarian chef?
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, I went on the Vans Warp Tour, which is a music tour through the US
Mhm.
and even parts of Canada. And it was like a 60-day tour. And I was their vegan vegetarian chef during that tour. And what's fascinating and I think really eye opening around, well, what does it mean to be vegan vegetarian? Well, and I'm not, of course, I'm going to speak generally because I know for some people this is not what it is. But at the time when I was a vegan vegetarian chef on this music tour, the food was fried and processed. And
Oh,
so being a vegan and vegetarian on this tour, that's really all it meant. It was just, yes, it was vegan food, but it was all fried and processed. So
that's gross.
yeah, it's totally gross. So I never really saw it as healthy. And I know that the people I was cooking for thought eating vegan or plant-based was healthy. And I just never abided by that. Even though I had learned to cook that way, I still didn't necessarily see it as like, well, this is the diet you should be on.
Good.
Um, yeah, so, but it really did help give me an advantage. It really helped. Like to this day, I love making sauces and dressings, and I really learned to use vegetables in a way in my sauces and dressings that I think a lot of chefs don't really learn typically. So I
Yeah,
really enjoyed that.
good. Yeah, I have one book that is just sauces and it's like that thick. And I haven't dealt into it as much as I would like to, but sauces are a wonderful and primary source of flavor. Um,
Absolutely. A funny story is, so when I met my wife, we were not dating at first, but we met and she had a book deal for this book called Eat Naked, and that was her brand at the time. And so we had this phone call where we had met, and then she said, "Hey, can I just give you a call and ask, kind of pick your brain?" Because she knew I was a chef, and she was about to do the recipe section of this book. And so the first thing I asked her when we were on this call is I said, "Well, so what does eat naked mean?" And she's kind
Mm-hmm.
of explaining and kind of going all over the place. And I said, "Well, I just don't understand," because she at first tried to describe it as like food that doesn't have sauces or dressings, and I'm like, but
Oh,
that's what distinguishes anything. Like,
yeah.
any cuisine is distinguished by its sauce that you add to it, right? Because what's the difference between Mexican, Italian, Indian, Moroccan? It's the sauce. It's all like,
Yes.
it's still chicken, or it's still beef, or it's still lamb, but
And
it's the
sometimes
sauce.
it's often, well, more than often, usually you are using even the same spices, at least a lot of the same spices and seasonings, but it's how you put them together or what else you pull into it that creates a completely different flavor profile and a different cuisine from one to the next.
Absolutely. So once after through that conversation, then she kind of adopted a new definition of eat naked, and I ended up helping her with that cookbook, the recipe section of her book, and then now we're married. So obviously it went well,
That's,
but
yeah.
it was a real testimony to me of, like, how important sauces and dressings are to me. And honestly, if we're talking about health, that is one of the areas that I think, if anyone is frustrated with any diet they're following, but they're just frustrated with their health, and they're struggling to either optimize their weight, or just clear their head, or clear their skin, or just kind of get healthy. One of the
Yeah.
first things I always recommend is you look at, well, what are you doing with your sauces and dressings? Because we're all using them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're buying them from a grocery store, you're getting very poor oils, lots of poor ingredients. And my preference, or one of the first things I would advise, is everyone start making things from scratch.
Yeah.
Just your sauces and dressings.
Yep.
If that's your
Yeah.
first step, you know what I mean? It's like, just do those at first, because you will find your health needle starts to move a lot just from doing that.
That's really good advice. You get rid of the seed oils, and then when you're starting with sauces and dressings and mayonnaise, now I use a lot of herbs in my mayonnaise typically, but you're introducing actual medicinal qualities. Usually, most sauces use stock or a broth as a base, or a consomme, a reduced stock. So there you've got a medicinal food, and you're adding herbs to it, and maybe you're adding coconut milk if it's Asian, or I don't know, you can elaborate on that, but you're putting it, it's about more than just flavor, but in assembling the components to make a beautiful flavor, you are at the same time assembling sort of medicine on a plate.
Absolutely. And even more so, to the point, like, you're removing, as you said, seed oils, but you're also removing a couple of ingredients that are primary in store-bought sauces and dressing, which is
Yes.
stabilizers, shelf,
Mm-hmm.
like, artificial ingredients, um, poor salts. We already said poor oils, but
Yeah.
like poor seasonings. But we have to remember that when you're buying from a grocery store, those processed packaged foods are designed for shelf stability, which
Mm-hmm.
could mean longevity on the shelf so that they don't go bad. It could mean
Right.
that they don't separate, that
Yeah.
they congealed, or whatever it is, like, in the mixture. Because if you make a seasoning from scratch, or sorry, not a seasoning, a dressing, and
Mm-hmm.
you make it, you shake it, you use it, and then if you have any left over and you put it in your refrigerator, it separates. That's what it
Right.
naturally does. But if
Yeah.
you notice in the grocery store, it doesn't always work like that. And then the other thing to think about is, if you were to make a dressing from scratch, there's no way that dressing could be left outside the refrigerator for weeks and months without spoiling. And so then you have
Yeah.
to ask, why are the ones on the grocery store not spoiling? So it's those ingredients that we're removing from our diet, and those a lot of times are the ones that are keeping us from our optimal health.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I'm thinking about the medicinal qualities of the good ingredients, but you're right to point out, and really for me, the motivating factor was years ago in learning to make my own things, including something as simple as mayonnaise, was I didn't want that crap going into my body or my family's bodies. So we're eliminating what part of what makes us sick, a big part of what makes us sick. And then in
Absolutely.
the process, we're also adding in good things that help to keep us well and make us well. So that's really neat. But you never yourself really bought into veganism or vegetarianism.
No, I mean, I've tried most diets. I mean, one of the things, so my kind of journey, I always wanted to cook from a little boy. Like I loved cooking, but my journey around diets came in my 20s. And I remember it started with a juice fast. So I did like
Oh
a
yeah, I did
7-day
that.
juice detox and I eased
Mm-hmm.
into it. And I remember like I could, smell my arm and I could smell, it was all metallic. So I knew I was like, detoxing heavy metals from my skin. And I was like, okay, this is really fascinating. And we had this book and we were just going through it. The person I was dating at the time, we were just going through it and doing different detoxes periodically. And that then got us experimenting. So then we went vegan and we were just doing like tofu as our protein for, I think like
Mm.
a good month or three, like 1 to 3 months. It was enough
Yeah.
time that I later on learned it affected my health, and I'll explain that in a moment. But then we also did all poultry at one point. Like we were trying to not eat beef and we did all poultry. Like, so I was definitely experimenting, trying different things, seeing what worked.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand. So this is before I went to culinary school and started learning more about nutrition. I didn't understand how doing these detoxes, well, I understood a little bit about the detoxes, but I didn't understand the potential harm that was occurring from some of these diets. So
Yeah.
I remember now I'm in my 20s and I'm living with the person I'm dating, and my sex drive went just down to nothing. And
Oh,
so
interesting.
I'm at like a really like powerful time of sexuality, in my early 20s, and
Yeah.
yet I didn't have a sex drive and I didn't understand why. I thought I was depressed. Well, I did feel depressed, but I thought it was because of
That
depression.
would, yeah.
You know where I'm
That would
going,
be
right?
depressing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was feeling depressed. I was also my career wasn't, I was an actor at the time and it wasn't doing what I wanted. So I was putting a
Mm.
lot of effort out and I wasn't getting back as much as I wanted at the time. And
Right.
I was struggling. We had just started dating or living together. And so that was also new. So there was a lot of emotional stuff going on at the time. And I thought that that's what was affecting my sex drive. And it could have been. But when I went to culinary school and we started learning about the effects of soy and basically how the the how it can affect your sex drive. When I heard that
Yeah.
in the nutrition class, I was like, the estrogen, how you can, it raises your levels of estrogen and it can lower your testosterone. And then you kind of
Right.
lowers your sex drive. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's what was going on because that's when I was eating plant-based at the time.
Yeah. And
So
most people are unaware of that totally, but it's a very real consequence.
oh, severely, and yeah, so and to this day when I talk about diets, because that's really why I do them to explore them, to have a better understanding of not only what my body craves, but also so that I can speak to them and learn what I need or don't need from them. And but to this
Yeah.
day, I really do see the importance of everyone having the dignity of that process, of whatever that process is, whether if you believe you should be plant-based or carnivore or omnivore, whatever it is you believe, to allow
Yeah.
yourself to go on that journey, because it's through that contrast or it's through that journey that you then land on what does work. But
Yeah.
the thing is you got to do one really, really important thing, which is you got to listen to the one person that will never abandon you, that is always by your side, and that's your body. You have to
Yeah.
listen and trust your body, because if you don't, then you're not being honest with yourself. And this is what we see a lot, right? With any diet, is
Yes.
we see people get on on their soapbox around the diet that's working for them,
Yeah.
and they speak about it as though everyone should be doing this diet. And then, at least I saw this a lot when I had a meal delivery service and when I was helping people with their diets. I would see these people that were on the soapbox of being a vegan, and
Yeah.
they were so adamant about how important this was to get healthy. But then I would look at them and they were overweight, their skin was poor, they had a huge digestive distress. So that, in other words, their body is screaming and saying, whatever you're doing is not working. And yet they weren't
Yeah.
listening. They were more focused on their kind of the head game around it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an ideology, whether we realize it or not. And not just veganism, but
It could be anything. Yeah, it could
yeah.
be even carnivore people
Yeah.
can, who are hardcore carnivore can go in. It's the same thing. It's just a different diet or a different
Yep.
ideology.
Yep. When you're getting overloaded on some things, but uh, you're still missing key components that come from other foods, and that's highly problematic. So, yeah, I teetered on veganism for a time, and I remember being pregnant with the fourth child, and I was eating very little animal product. We lived on a farm. I did have raw milk and fresh eggs, so I had those things, but otherwise, we were eating a lot of soy for protein. And being pregnant, I felt like total crap. It was awful. Next time around, I got off of that bandwagon and started. Actually, I even remember being pregnant with one of the children and still, on this kind of a diet. It was at the beginning of that phase. I craved salt and fat and protein so badly that I snuck to McDonald's, of all places, to get a cheeseburger. And I didn't tell anybody for years, but my body was craving the fat and the protein and also the salt. I wasn't getting enough salt either. So our bodies will be screaming and we'll be telling ourselves, no, no, this isn't real. No, animal foods are bad or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, did you do carnivore as well for a time?
Yeah. I did that for 30 days, and no, and it was great. I mean, what I loved about carnivore is that it's simple. There's no decision fatigue. You just
Hmm.
you eat beef. Eat a ribeye, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
it was kind of like an easy diet to use, because a lot of times with diets is you're having to readjust and figure out new things, and you might kind of like get overwhelmed by the actual standards of that diet. With carnivore, it's like it's simple. It's like, okay, this is, it's beef and salt, that's it. So I appreciated that part, but I also got very bored. Like, I'm a flavor
Yeah.
guy, and so at one point I even started using Pluck on the steaks, because I was just like, even though Pluck, well, the three flavors, this one and this one and this
Hmm.
zesty garlic, these three are not strict carnivore because they have
They
herbs
have
and spices in
plants.
it. Yeah, they have herbs and spices, and then the pure is, and a lot of carnivore people use the black bag, the pure with smoked sea salt, which sounds actually fantastic. And I wish I had done that then, but I started using Pluck on them, and it just made it so much better for me because it has so much flavor when I do. I did get a little constipated,
Yeah.
um, and in general, I found that I was craving certain things, like I was craving certain vegetables, and so I think in all these years, that's ultimately what I really focus on is listening to the body. Now, not taking it
Yep.
literal, like, because sometimes you might be craving ice cream and be like, oh, well, that must mean I need ice cream. So it's not necessarily about an apple to apple kind of thing. It's more, though, just really listening, engaging, like, what are my needs right now? And I'll even share
Yeah.
this. This is fascinating. So right now I'm doing a no fat diet, which I now know sounds kind of crazy, but it's just 3 weeks. So I'm still eating animal, like I'm eating lean meats. So I am still getting some fat, but I'm not
Okay.
eating the ribeyes that I was. I'm not eating the fatty cuts. I'm not eating the pork I previously was. I'm not eating tons of nuts that like I was. I'm not like putting tons of lard or anything in the pan when I'm cooking things as I was, or ghee or anything like that. I'm not eating as much butter as I used to. And I'm just doing
That's so
this.
sad.
I know it really is, but I'm doing this for 3 weeks and it's incredibly challenging. But what I'm learning is what's key. And I think that ultimately this is kind of the process of what we always want to be challenging ourselves, I believe, to improve or get closer to what our actual instincts are. And it's really challenging in today's modern world. Am I wanting this food because I nutritionally need it, or because I am emotionally eating? Like, that's the question I have
Yeah.
to ask myself every single day. And what I'm finding while I'm not eating fats is that I am emotionally eating those fats most of the time. That I'm getting
No.
way too much fat in my diet and I'm not burning it. That's one
Yeah.
thing. But then two, I was depending on that fat to push down the emotions that I feel sometimes on a daily basis, whether it's depressing tones or just fears or anxieties, that I was using the fat in my diet because I don't eat tons of sugar and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
previously I did that with sugar, but then when I went off sugar, I moved that to fat. And I was just I was just gorging on different fat, whether it's butter or nuts or anything like that, to push those emotions down. And so I think that for me, it's not a dogmatic of like, oh, all fat is good and just go eat as much fat as you want. It's like we're still sometimes using these foods as crutches. And that ultimately, one is to starve or to be hungry is not a bad thing. It's okay, because previously,
Yeah.
ancestrally, we did do that.
Right.
But two,
Regularly.
regularly, and two, pushing against like your motivations, and your crutches, like kind of challenging yourself around them, is really important to better assess what your body really needs and wants.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Um, I've done low fat dieting in the past years ago, but it was not a whole foods low fat dieting. But I can tell you that when I did that, all I thought about was food. When I could have my next meal. What was I going to have? I'd plot it out in my head. I'd look at my watch and count the hours and the minutes. You're not finding that you're doing that though.
No, I mean, not at all, because I'm still
Well, you're
eating
eating protein.
Yeah, I'm still eating animal protein, and I'm eating lots of vegetables if I want them. I'm finding I'm really craving like cultured vegetables and pickles and things like that,
Yes.
lacto fermented pickles. Um,
Good.
and
Yeah.
so I'm definitely eating a lot of that stuff, but I still eat a good amount of meat. It's just lean meat right now. And I'm in my second week right now, and I'm going to do one more week. And for me, it's just been a really interesting, um, like an experiment, but also really informative around my food dependence and around, I think wearing a glucose monitor, a CGM, is really helpful
Yeah.
for this as well. But I think I'm realizing more and more that I am eating when I'm actually not hungry, and that the question then becomes, well, why? Why am I doing that? And like, actually, right now, it's so funny. Um, I know I'm not alone with this, because I know other people that do this. But so right now, I can't do sugar. I can't do anything but lean protein, vegetables, and I do a little bit of fruit each day. So what I've been doing is I've been grabbing these bags of Pluck, and I'll literally go through each one, and I'll just take a spoon and I'll start spooning it in my mouth, and
Oh,
using that almost as a snack to give myself kind of some flavor, but also the nutrition of the organ meats, and then just kind of make me feel like the emotions that I would have been using nuts or fat or sugar for, that I'm getting are getting something. It's getting satiated in some way.
yeah.
It's kind of bizarre. I'm very in it, so I'm experiencing it, but I think it's an indication, and this is what I think is so fascinating, is that I'm looking for something. So it's like my addiction, right? It's like someone who used to get high and is looking for a fix.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
literally I've finished my meal and I'm satiated, but I'm still looking for a fix. And so that's, most people would handle that in, okay, let me have a cup of yogurt with berries, or let me have some ice cream. That's when people eat their meal and then have like a dessert, right? Or a snack. That's what
right.
they're doing. And since I can't do that, I'm doing it with my seasoning,
Which is
but I'm
not a
still
bad
looking for
thing.
the fix. No, yeah, it's probably a healthier option for it. But I guess what I'm sharing is that I'm still looking for a fix. And all I'm
Yeah,
doing is I'm transferring that fix to something that's maybe, you know, more healthy, or maybe that's less damaging, or whatever. But at this point, I'm more observing that I'm still looking for a fix, and I'm trying to
yeah.
not judge it as like wrong or right.
You're just being insightful. I wonder if when you add the fat back in, you will have a similar experience as I did have several times, and that is that when I have plenty of fat, I just am not craving anything else. I'm not craving sugar. I'm not craving junk. I'm just satiated. So my primary foods are protein and fat, and I love vegetables. How can you handle vegetables without butter?
I know it's really hard. Everything I've been cooking everything in like water, basically. It's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That
I agree. There's so much better with it. Yeah, and in no way am I recommending, oh, people should do this. But like I said, this is my way of challenging my own conceptions of what it is I need. And, no different than someone who's intermittent fasting, who has to deal
mm,
with their hunger when they first start, or, that kind of like pushing yourself up against that discomfort. I mean,
yeah,
honestly, though, Maureen, like I'm really like I'm learning, and I think a lot of people are like this, and don't want to admit it, to be honest with you. But I am kind of learning. I'm an all or nothing guy. Like I don't do well with moderation. So back in the day when we had those cheat days, like those never worked
yeah,
for me. They never worked for me, because I would have a
yeah,
cheat day, would eat anything I wanted, and then it would take me like 2 or 3 days, 2 days to kind of get back to just eating cleanly.
yeah.
So
I'm with you. I'm like that too.
it opens the door, you know what I mean? And like for me, it really helps me with my health when I'm just very specific about what I can or can't eat. And I don't mind that discipline. Like I'm not someone who's like, I don't feel like I'm missing out when I don't eat that cookie, or, yet I'm getting one for my kids or something. Like I don't feel like
Yeah.
I don't feel deprived about that stuff. What I'm ultimately locked into is what is my why? Like why am I trying to be healthy? What matter, like what is my goal in all of this? And it's ultimately like I'm just chasing longevity. I just want to
Mhm.
be around long enough to be with my kids and my family. I don't want to die young.
Yeah.
I want to age gracefully, and thrive all the way to my, late 90s to early hundreds if I can, so that is what I'm chasing. And so that means more to me than the cookie, or the excessiveness, or the addiction of food, or whatever it is.
I completely understand that because you've put into words really what I guess what I've kind of my goal has been for many years too, and I also do not feel any deprivation. Um, I I teetered for a long time on veganism, and I've talked about this on other shows. I'm not going into it, but the Hallelujah diet thing was way back when. And then I embraced meat and raw dairy and all of that stuff. I did try carnivore for 3 weeks because I promised pork rind that I would.
Hmm.
And I kind of promised everybody, okay, I'm going to do it for a month. After 3 weeks, I said, no, I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah. So,
Um,
because that's recent then, because I know you met him just a few years ago. So
yeah.
how did that go for you?
Well, it got boring. The only things I craved pretty much were my vegetables. I really just wanted some steamed broccoli with butter, you know. But I didn't have that. Stayed away from it. I didn't feel any better. I felt less energy, actually. And so after 3 weeks, I said, nope, I need to function better than this. And mind you, the thing that I did do that was different was I included fermented vegetables. So I had sauerkraut or the brine every day because I don't believe it's good for the body, especially long term, not to have those foods anyway, but to break down all that protein and fat, you need some ferments in there. So going into it, I said, I'm going to definitely have sauerkraut or other fermented vegetables, and I'm definitely going to include dairy. That's an animal product. So I never gave up my raw milk and my yogurt, my 24-hour cultured yogurt.
But you
But
ate
I
them
stuck,
plain though. You ate them plain,
yeah.
the
And
yogurt.
actually, honestly, I do anyway.
Hmm.
I've gotten used to it. I enjoy it that way. We can adjust our taste buds, as I know you know, we can adjust our taste buds to whatever we choose. But when our body is missing nutrients, then we're going to crave foods like you mentioned, ice cream. Well, with ice cream, you're probably missing the fat for energy, and the sugar is fast energy, so that's why your body's craving it. So, when we pay attention to our bodies like you are, and we can listen to it, we can interpret what signals the body's giving us because it is really our best friend. You alluded to that. Um, we can figure out it's if our body's craving something that we know is not healthy. Well, it's not that our body needs that unhealthy food. It's that our body needs XYZ, whatever it is, that is a key component of that food.
Right.
So with carnivore, I just wanted my steamed vegetables and my butter.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I love you probably know Bill Schindler of Eat Like
Mhm.
a Human and Modern Stone Age Kitchen. And I
Yep.
what I love about one of the things I really love about Bill is there's a couple. So one is he's got a great quote about how we're the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat. And there's nearly 9 million species in the world. So it tells you how far removed we are from our ancestral knowledge of what we need to eat. So
Yep.
that's one thing that quote always kind of floors me.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a good one.
but the other thing, and this is kind of speaks to these different diets and what's right or wrong, is I love how he positions it. He's like, okay, we we used to be foragers. This is
Hmm.
millions of years ago. We were foragers, and the energy that it took to look or the amount of calories you could get from foraging, you had to spend all day foraging, like, and
Yeah.
then it's still not a lot of calories, right? So we had smaller brains then. We didn't have certain qualities that we now have, of course. And so then after foraging, it went to scavenging. And when we were scavengers, we were still not the predators. So we would come upon, let's say, a dead animal, but the predator had already taken all the things that were extremely nutritious. So we did still
Which
get like a,
included,
yeah, I'm gonna get there. I know exactly where you're going.
yep,
So we were able to still get some muscle meat there, but it really
yeah.
didn't change us genetically very much at that point, or biologically. It didn't change us that much. And then this is where you're going, is then we became the predator, and we had a tool, and now we killed the animal, and we got three things we previously did not get, those million years before, or half a million before, is we got blood, organs, and fat.
Yeah.
And those three very nutritious parts of the animal, changed our entire biology. We got bigger brains. We got language, which is why we're even able to talk now. We also got fire at the time, but this is really the period not too much long after that established the body that we are currently in. And one of the things
Can I
that,
just interrupt for
yeah,
just a
yeah,
moment before you go on?
yeah,
I have to say, and because I know our listeners are going, what? You're speaking from an evolutionary standpoint. I am very solidly creationist, but what you're saying also, when you put it into a creation story, we're not talking about millions of years, but in the beginning, from my viewpoint and my belief system, we started in a garden and we did not need animal products at that time.
Mm,
We didn't need them. The body was living in a non-toxic environment. The body was, well, it was perfect in the beginning and then very close to perfection. And then as time went on and what we would say is sin entered the world, then everything begins to change. But then the point of time comes, and from my viewpoint, it came from Noah and his family stepping off the ark. And from that point forward, man was not just eating plants. And I do believe they probably were also consuming dairy products. They kept sheep and goats, and I don't think they needed that much fur. Um, then, yes, then man took a tool and killed an animal in a prescribed way, I might add, and then had the benefit of, now we weren't supposed to eat blood, but there was blood, and there was blood in the flesh meat, but there were organs and there were bones, and from that point on, people used the whole animal, and never just the
and
flesh.
benefited from that.
Yes, and benefited very greatly. And in the animal world, um, correct me if I'm wrong, you may know more about this than me, but I believe it's the hyena that gets sort of the last bite. The lion, or well, actually hyenas kill as well, but different animals kill and eat key parts, which you're going to go into and why, and then all the scavengers come in and they
Yeah, the
clean up the
vultures
rest.
and hyenas are scavengers as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, absolutely. And whatever your belief, because
Hmm.
I think it works in both scenarios, right?
It does, and so
It,
I wanted to point that out. Yeah.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And something that Bill talked about, and I have to imagine that this also fits, but you could tell me if I'm wrong. Is that so? In that, from his perspective of being, he's a professor of archaeology, but then focused on food. So he's kind of like a food archaeologist. And so
Yeah.
this is, I'm more just kind of sharing what he would say. And so he would say how, every animal out there has their survival qualities. So some might
Mhm.
have really big claws, some might be able to see in the dark, big ears that turn, um, separate from the
Yeah.
head,
Yeah.
big teeth, big fast abilities to be very fast. Well, what we sacrificed, in a sense, when that change happened of how we ate, is that we lost the ability to digest some of these plants, some of these things that were previously part of our diet. And
Yeah,
what we got
that's
was
true.
all that energy went to like a much bigger brain, and our digestive tract got smaller. And so some people will say, well, that's why we shouldn't eat these vegetables and we should only eat meat. And his whole point is like, well, no, what, the bigger brain enabled us to think and create
Hmm.
a digestive system that is outside of our body. And that's through fermentation, that's
Yeah.
through sourdough process. It's all these
Yeah.
processes that allow the vegetables or the grains or the nuts to be easily assimilated into our bodies and
Yes.
easily absorbed. And so it's not like an all or nothing, like you should only eat meat and don't do these other things, the way a lot of influencers are talking now. But it's more about, well, no, it's how are you eating them? and
Yes.
and it's the how that distinguishes whether that food is going to be healthy or not healthy for you,
Right.
not the
And
food
then,
itself.
right. Yeah, yeah. And I, for the record, do think our brains were our brains, and I believe we were created with a digestive system the same that we have now. But obviously, some things changed between the very beginning. And so I'm going to just say from the time of Adam to the time of Noah. Something changed, and
Mm.
including, I believe, the atmosphere, the earth, everything around us. So our needs changed, our abilities to break down different types of food changed, and we have the brains to tell us, oh, let's ferment this stuff, or and people didn't 5,000 years ago didn't know that fermentation helped you to digest your food with because the enzymes break down fats and proteins and the microbiology cleanses your gut and takes nutrients into the bloodstream. They didn't know all of that, of course, but I'm pretty sure that they could tell the difference in how they felt between eating say, killing an animal and eating it and not having fermented vegetables on hand, or if they made sourdough bread versus when they just did they ever just take grains and actually make a meal of it without it being fermented. There would have been a big difference in how their digestive system felt and functioned. Does that make sense?
Oh, I absolutely believe. I mean, everything has a process to it, right? What I'm
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
fascinated, like I definitely think about that. Like, for example, and this might make you laugh, but it's like, how the heck did the person figure out how to do artichokes? Like, who the heck figured that one out?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, there are,
Because you look at that plant and there's no, how did you know that, okay, A, you can't eat it right from picking it, and then how did you know that you had
no,
to cook it so long and then it was edible? Because most people
yeah,
look at an artichoke and be like, well, can't do that, so not going to even
yeah.
try.
Yeah, there are a lot
You
of
know, it's
foods
like,
like that. They have these protective factors that, whoa, there's no way I can eat that. And even if you can get past the prickliness, then you've got this hard thing. What are you
yeah,
going to do with that?
like who
I
figured
don't
that
know.
out? You know what I mean? Like, to me that's just amazing.
Yeah, it is
When you
to me
think of
too.
some of the food history that we are, now reaping the benefits from the knowledge that's come thousands of years before us, of course.
Yeah, yeah. You're probably something like me, a foodie nerd, where maybe you watched BBC documentaries about food in medieval times or life on the farm in second century England or something. Well, there wasn't an England in the second century, but anyway, that kind of stuff fascinates me. But as we get into, and we're running out of time, so I want to really get to the important stuff, which is the nutrients that you're getting from an omnivorous diet. Now, we know if we eat our vegetables and we cook them and we serve them with some fat, saturated fat, that our bodies can metabolize the vitamin content, say the vitamin A and the vitamin D, and all of those things are fat soluble vitamins and the minerals. Not everybody knows this, of course, but aside from vegetables and fermentation, which we'll get into and have gotten into in other episodes, let's talk about the meat, the animal, the whole animal, and the nutrients that you can only get from those foods.
Yeah, so I mean, we talk a lot in our current modern world about what's good for the planet. This kind of green talk
Yeah.
or is happening, and along with that comes a lot of greenwashing. Like, so people are like, oh, you should only drive electric cars, but then what happens when an electric car no longer works? How do we recycle it? And no one has solved that yet, for example. And then, like, plus all the electric car products are being made from coal and oil, so those companies are just
Yep.
laughing,
And
right? So
slave labor.
yeah, so it's a form of greenwashing, right? When we
Yeah.
don't have the whole full circle figured out, we've only figured out one
Right.
piece. Well, I feel like that's what's happening with animals, where we are slaughtering a cow, but then we're using about 50% of it with the meat and some of the other parts. But about the other 50%, we're just kind of like tossing and or putting into other industry like pets or like bone meal for soil sometimes. But for the most part, it's not going to humans. And so then what happens is, well, we're then not getting the nutrients we need from our food. And we're then turning to supplements, which most of those are laboratory made.
Yes.
And so for my money and for for planet, the health of the planet, for the health of me, and for my pocketbook, I
Mm-hmm.
vote for whole animal,
Yeah.
because you can take, for example, 100% grass-fed cow where the ribeye is $25 a pound, and that same cow, that same healthy cow, has a tongue, has a heart, has lungs, has parts to it that are not $25 a pound, that are like the tongue of that animal is $6 a pound. Some of the
Yeah.
organs are like $4 a pound. So you can literally get the same or better nutrition, but from the same quality of animal for less. So right there, you're saving money.
Yeah.
But the other piece is that I look at these things and I think about, okay, well, back in the day, if we were a tribe of, let's say, 23 people, and what would normally happen is you'd have to go out to slaughter that animal. So what you would probably do is you would fast to heighten your senses. Then you
Mm-hmm.
would go on the hunt. A certain amount of people would go on that hunt. It would take you so many days to find that animal, sometimes even weeks, right? To then kill that animal. And the first thing you do after you kill that animal is you need to replenish your stores. And so they would grab the heart or the liver and they would
Mm-hmm.
eat it raw. And they would eat it right there. And they would replenish the nutrition that they had been missing from fasting. And so now when they bring that animal back after it's been dressed to the tribe, well, let's just say they ate the heart. Well, that means there's no heart for anyone else. Because the
Yeah.
animal only has one liver, two little
Mm-hmm.
kidneys, only has so many parts to it. So this idea that we should only be eating ribeyes and only be eating liver is, to me, insanity, because that's not how our bodies are
Yeah.
designed. We're designed for the whole animal, and that each organ,
Mm-hmm.
there's that idea of like supports like, right? So each organ has the
Yes.
nutrients that are supporting that part in you. And so, for example, we focus on the liver, but the spleen has 5 times the amount of iron that the liver does.
That's
The
amazing.
pancreas, for example, and these are all parts of the animal that are in Pluck. Where Pluck has liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. So the
And
pancreas,
you
for
never see
example,
that, by the way. We see
no,
liver and heart in
yes,
other
exactly.
products.
Exactly. And so the pancreas, of why we include the pancreas, because it's a natural digestive enzyme. So the
Yes.
pancreas supports digestion. And so by adding pancreas, you don't need to worry as much about, like, oh, should I be taking my pineapple isolate enzyme to help digestion? It's like you don't need it, because the pancreas
Right.
will support the digestion. So
Yeah.
every part of that animal is giving you some kind of benefit. And when the more we can get, my goal is the more we can get of that animal that you're not getting. So you're getting plenty of muscle, but you're not getting the other things like lung and
Yeah.
brain and pancreas and spleen. Like, the more I can help people in getting those parts, then I feel like I'm supporting people in getting more optimally healthy, because these are the parts of the animal we're not getting at all.
And yet our body needs that desperately. And that's why the animal eats the parts, the innards, before the animal is going to eat the muscle meat. But we as people have gotten away from that. I'm so thankful that you have a product that offers all of that. So that is Pluck seasoning, and I'm glad for it. I'm very pleased with it. We've talked, and you mentioned a few minutes ago too, like, I've said this many times myself. Instead of like cures like, as in homeopathy, like builds like. And so we really truly need all of those parts. And brain food, what is the ultimate brain food?
It's
It
brain
would
and
be
and
brain.
And it's interesting too, because I'll say, like, oh, our ancestors ate it, and people think I'm talking about, Homo sapien ancestors, and I'm like, way back in the day, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago, and I'm like, no, I'm talking about
No.
our grandparents.
Yep.
Like, I
Yep.
mean, I'm sure you grew up eating brain, right? Or particularly if you
No,
grew up on a farm.
I grew up in America's Dairyland, farms all around me. My grandmother was a well-known cook, but everything she made came from a can, a box, or a package from the freezer. So I have the bad teeth to show for that. And my mother had a lot of health problems. My grandmother grew up on a farm.
And they probably ate like that. Yeah.
They ate like that until she got married and then started in the 1930s when the processed foods became available and it was all the rage. Then even the farmers started abandoning their good food and, they're buying potato chips and margarine and canned green beans.
Well, and
Uh,
I think if you look back at history, what we're experiencing right now is nothing new. I mean, it's not new. This cycle of dieting and this kind of process of this kind of pull and tug around ultra processed foods. This is not new. I mean, as you mentioned, our parents or our grandparents went through the same thing when these new foods were invented and these new modern techniques of preservation. These were exciting
yeah.
times, right? It was like you were stepping into the future. Freeze-dried food at the time was exciting, in the 50s and 60s because it was seen as like
Yeah.
space food, right? And so
Yeah.
anything freeze-dried was attractive, whether it's candy or anything, right? But I think I think what we're kind of facing though, at least what I default to, is that we're overrun with these philosophies, these diets, these kind of
Hmm.
influencers pushing their agendas. And I'm no different, and you're no different. Like we're all in that camp.
Here we are. Yeah.
But what I think hopefully sets us apart, and I know you identify with this, so I'm going to lump you in as well with this, which is ultimately what we're talking about is we just want you to eat real food. That
Yes.
if we just on a base level just do that, if we just eat food that is an ingredient versus food that has ingredients, and then make
Right.
decisions based on that. So I'm not saying don't do any processed food, because technically if I cut an apple, that's not processed, right? If I pull an apple from a tree, that's a
Yeah.
processed apple. So we don't,
If you ferment cabbage, it's a process.
it's a process, exactly. So we're not necessarily focusing on the process on a very simple level, but we're starting with, let's just focus on eat real food, then
Yes.
focus on, okay, how is it processed? And then focus on, well, actually, I say focus on real food, focus then
Hmm.
on ingredients, how it's processed, and then make decisions on, do I want to eat this ultra processed food? But that should be the last thing you go for, not the first thing. And right now, that's the kind of situation we're in. Is it's first, it's many people's first choice, and for many people, they don't have any other choice. Like they
Yeah.
only have processed foods as their options, or ultra
Much to
processed
their
foods.
detriment.
Right. So
I'm going to have to cut this short because I'm at well, not short, but we might need to just come back and continue this conversation, but I'm at the Weston A. Price office and they need to, everybody's ready to go home. So,
okay.
but this is where I wanted to end up and delve deeply anyway. And so maybe we can come back at a later date and start going into very specific nutrients and how they interact if you're willing to do that.
Yeah,
Not
let's schedule
today,
it.
not
I
tomorrow.
love talking with you, but yeah, let's schedule it. And thank you for those that did join us today. I'm
Yeah.
grateful. I see Boston Rock 76
Hey,
has all the Pluck
Carmen.
flavors. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
And just
good.
to quickly answer one question, which is they mentioned how the stores are not carrying organs the way they used to, and it's true. I mean, that is our ultimate power, which is what we buy is what they'll carry. So
Yep.
if we stop
And what
buying
we
organ
ask
meats, they're going to
for.
stop carrying them. So
Yep.
the more you can start buying these kind of things, the more they'll start carrying them. But
Yep.
thank you all,
So
and
request them. And you guys, I'm not on my laptop like normal, so I'm not seeing questions. So with technical challenges today in a computer that wouldn't charge, I can't use my regular platform. Anyway, I thank you, Jamie, so much. Let's remind everyone where we can find you and
yeah.
any last words for the moment.
Yeah, so website is eatpluck.com. God's Good Table has a discount code, and so you definitely, Maureen will share that at one
Yeah.
point. And then you can find us on socials. I'm at Chef James Berry. and Eat Pluck is at Eat Pluck. And we love, if you have Pluck, you're using it, share your experience. We appreciate all amplification of the message. We really,
Yeah.
really are grateful for our the people that are, allowing us into their kitchen via our
Yeah.
spice.
Yeah, very good. We were talking, Yolanda and I, who does the cooking here at the office, we were talking about Pluck before we came on. But everyone, thank you. And we'll come back with Jamie another time. And I'd even like to interview Jamie's wife, who has a platform of her own, a business of her own, which is helping people with their health problems. So that might be another interview that we can do at a later date. But thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye bye.